Good afternoon, everyone. Call to order this meeting of the Thompson-Nicola Regional District for Thursday, the 26th of March, 2026. The TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nations across our vast regional district, and today we are located on the Tecumloops-Secwepemc territory situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with Tecumloops-Secwepemc and respects the territory and land upon which we gather today. I did have a note that alternate director Noni McCann was going to be here for Denise O'Connor, but Director O'Connor is very much with us today, so that has been crossed out. Chair's updates. Library update. 2025 was another fantastic year for the Thompson-Nicola Regional Library. Our continued growth and strong community support were reflected across the system, with more than 400,000 in-person visits to our libraries, over 53,000 active cardholders, and a total circulation exceeding 1 million items. These numbers represent more than just statistics. They reflect the essential role that our libraries play in the lives of residents across our region. You can find the full 2025 By the Numbers report at tnrl.ca/about-the-TNRL. Upcoming meetings and events. The Thompson-Nicola Invasive Plant Management Committee is meeting on April 15th at 1:30 p.m. On April 16th, we have the Regional Solid Waste Management Committee at 10 a.m., regular board meeting at 1:30 p.m. Committee of the Whole meeting on the 17th of April, starting at 9 a.m. From April 21st to 23rd, there is the CAO Chair Forum in Victoria. And from April 29th to May 2nd, there is the SILGA Convention in beautiful Revelstoke. Today in your blue folders, you will find regular mail, budget 2026 infographics pertaining to your municipality or electoral area, an email regarding the Ma'atumuk Solar EA request for technical advisors and review of initial project, about which Director Grenier will be speaking. In the event of an emergency, if the fire alarm sounds, please leave by the safest exit doors, either at the rear of the room to the left or the main entrance. Go down the staircase, exit the building, and assemble in the staff car parking lot at the back of the Paramount Theatre. Please do not run. Please do not use the elevators. If you have issues with mobility, please advise the corporate officer. And CAO Hildebrand, I believe you have an introduction to make.
Thank you, Chair Roden. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to introduce Janine Felker. She's sitting directly behind me right here. She officially joined the TNRD finance team this week as the finance manager. Janine brings extensive public sector financial leadership experience, most recently serving as Associate Director of Accounting at Thompson Rivers University. Janine comes from a family of local government and has more than a decade of experience, including roles as CFO Deputy CAO of the City of Armstrong and Director of Finance for the Municipal District of Pincher Creek in Alberta. Janine is highly skilled in financial management, budgeting, legislative compliance, and leading high-performance teams. And I see is already sitting beside our auditor, so we're in good spirit. And so please join me in welcoming Janine to the team.
Thank you, CAO Hildebrand. Additions to or deletions from the agenda. We have two additions of which I know. One is the request for a letter of support from Kamloops Tourism Kamloops. That is under correspondence for action and has been emailed to all directors and is also included in your blue folders. And Director Grenier, under new business, will be bringing a couple of motions regarding the new solar project planned for his area. We have the minute. So could I, are there any other additions to or deletions from the agenda? Corporate Officer Jeremiah.
Thank you, Chair Roden. We will need to remove item 16, the closed meeting, from the agenda.
Right, yes, remove item 16, closed meeting. So with those two additions, one deletion, could I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Second. Director O'Toole, seconded by Vice Chair Smith. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. We have the minutes of the regular meeting held on March the 5th. Director Blackwell, seconded by Director Sarai. Thank you. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Delegations invited presentations, building infraction BP 018297, electoral area N. This is an opportunity for the owner or owners to make representation to the board respecting the building infraction. Is there anyone here to speak to this today? Either in the gallery or online? All right, seeing none, we move on to 7.1. Unfinished business, building infraction, BP 018297. We do have a recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Director Thorpe moves the recommendation, seconded by Vice Chair Smith. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. 7.2, Cairnstone Planning on behalf of Northern Development Initiative Trust. We do have a request for a letter of support. And there was a letter attached as an example for the letter of support they are looking for. Anyone like to move that letter of support? Director Thorpe, seconded by Director Stankey. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Question period. Any questions from anyone in the gallery? Any questions from anyone online? Seeing none, we move on to item 9.1, bylaws. Electoral Area B, Mosquito Control Service Area Establishment Bylaw. We have a number of recommendations. Director Onslow, you might want to move that first recommendation. Seconded by Director Blackwell. Is there any discussion on this? Director Onslow, did you have anything you needed to add or wanted to add to this? No? Pretty self-explanatory. They don't want mosquitoes. Okay. That's the gist. Official. All right, so any more discussion on recommendation 1 to initiate a public assent process for the establishment of a mosquito control service in electoral area B? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? No one wants to come out in support of the mosquitoes. All right. All right, that passes. We move on to recommendation 2. Director Onslow, seconded by Director Smith. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Recommendation 3, Director Onslow, seconded by Director Newstater. Discussion? Anyone opposed? In favor? That's carried. Number 4, Director Onslow. Director Getz is going to second that one. All right, any discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. We're on to number 5 now. Director Houghton, seconded by Director Onslow. And this is the question for the assent voting on the bylaw number 2920. Any discussion on the wording? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Development applications 10.1. We have a temporary use permit application number TUP 83. We do have a recommendation. Director Sarai, seconded by Director O'Reilly. Any discussion on this item? Which is for a property in Blue River. No discussion? All right. On the application then, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Agricultural Land Commission application ALR 258. This is up Deadman Vidette Road. Director Thorpe.
I will be excusing myself. I know some of the proponents.
Thank you. Okay. So that is moved by Director Houghton and seconded by Director Grenier. Any discussion on this item? Speak, Director Blackwell.
Maybe staff can answer this, but having 50 some odd years ago, and I hate saying that, lived on a pheasant farm that was basically created for the same purposes as this. Is there any requirement, noting the uh, hunting activity that they're saying, that there is likelihood of birds getting away from them and the property? Is there any environmental requirement to make sure that doesn't happen?
Through the chair, that's a good question. Not something that we could regulate, but I understand that they do have to get a provincial approval of some sort or go through some kind of a process there. But it's nothing that we would have enforcement opportunities on.
Thank you, Director Getz.
In the Merritt area, we had a similar situation where a gentleman would put on a Ducks Unlimited situation like this, and he used pheasants, and a lot of the pheasants did get away, but they populated the airport and they've actually become part of our community now. They've, in the wild, managed to. So if you want to see some pheasants, you head up to the airport and there they are. But it stemmed from this hunt years ago, and not all the birds were taken, and it's no big deal. It's no big deal at all, actually.
Are they voting members of the community?
No, but there is one that terrorizes a school every once in a while, so they call it the evil bird, but anyway.
Well, as a note of interest, chucker partridges, which I love as the absolute stupidest birds in the world, but they are endearingly stupid. They are not native to this area. They were brought here in the late 19th century to hunt. And obviously more than a few got away and did not get hunted, and they have provided us with these cute little clowns that we all know and love today. All right, any more discussion on this? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Director Blackwell? That is carried. Just wait for Director Thorpe to come in. Thank you. We move on to item 10.3, Agricultural Land Commission application ALR 260 in Coldwater. And you have a recommendation. Director O'Reilly moved that, seconded by Director Sarai. Any discussion on this item? Director Blackwell.
And I did read the report, but how close, there's the household of the property owners is across the street. How close are the next nearest neighbors? Do we know that?
Through the chair, the parcel is quite large, over 258 acres. The closest, you can kind of see it on the front map on the report. Don't know the exact distance, but it's over 200 meters away.
Okay.
So certainly there's no public process as part of the ALR application. But should the ALR approve this, the owners will be applying, or the applicant will be applying for a temporary use permit, and that will involve the public, and we'll certainly reach out to make sure they have a say on this.
Okay, thank you, because I'm assuming this is going to make a heck of a lot of noise. So thank you for that information.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? On the question, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. 10.4, Agricultural Land Commission application ALR 257, Green Lake South Road. You have a recommendation. Director Ranta, seconded by Director Thorpe. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Move on to 11.1.1, CAO verbal report. I will hand it over to CAO Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair Roden. I just have a few updates for the board this afternoon. So good afternoon, everyone. Starting with the mobile library update. In late December and early January, the mobile library received its regular mechanical service and inspections. However, shortly after returning to the road in January, it experienced further issues with its hydraulic slides and stairs. Staff have been advised that the recommended repairs are costly and would not fully restore reliable operation. In at least one case, the proposed recommendation would render the vehicle unsafe for patrons unless additional investment is made to retrofit the unit for safe boarding. For these mechanical and safety reasons, the library has made the difficult decision to permanently remove the truck from service. In the interim, the team is maintaining service using the library's outreach van while working towards leasing a smaller vehicle such as a Sprinter or a Ford Transit van as discussed at the recent Committee of the Whole meeting on February 13th. Leasing and trialing this service in a new vehicle will help evaluate how the mobile library performs on a smaller platform before committing to a longer-term strategy. Staff are keeping patrons informed while focused on needs identified in the survey, including raising awareness of digital services and providing in-person, print, and online support to access them and place things on holds. Number two, I've got an update on the regional fire chief. As many of you may already know, Jason Tomlin, our manager of fire and protective services, will be retiring this May. Last month, we began a search for Jason's successor. While the core responsibility of the role remains largely unchanged, we have renamed the position to Regional Fire Chief to more accurately reflect the chain of command among the 9 TNRD administered fire departments, as well as the ultimate responsibility and liability being held with the TNRD. Each department will continue to have its own chief, and there are no changes to these local leadership roles. Before posting the job under its new title, Jamie reached out to each of our fire chiefs, and all have expressed their support for this update. The position has attracted significant interest from across Canada, and interviews were completed over the last couple of weeks. We anticipate selecting a candidate soon and expect a smooth transition with Jason to ensure continuity of the department, and we hope to be making that announcement very soon, actually. As far as the annual report goes, our annual report is on track and should be ready for April 16th board meeting. The report is designed to provide residents with a clear, accessible overview of the regional district, helping the public better understand our services, our finances, our governance, and the communities we serve. The 2025 edition will include approximately 50 projects and service updates, highlight key achievements from the last year, and demonstrate how these efforts benefited communities across the region. Mike Coulter, our visual communications specialist, continues to do excellent work, laying out the report in a format that is engaging and easy to read, supported by strong photography that showcases our communities. Producing the annual report is truly an organization-wide effort, with every department contributing information to ensure we are communicating the most important and relevant details to our residents. And then finally, a Fire Smart rebate program. Earlier this week, we announced the launch of the TNRD Fire Smart rebate program from 2026, which opens on April 1st. Property owners in the 10 TNRD electoral areas can apply for a rebate covering up to 50% of eligible Fire Smart work to a maximum of $1,000 for work completed within 30 meters of their home. The $1,000 rebate represents an increase from last year when 2 rebate options were available at $500 and $750 respectively. In 2025, more than $38,000 in Fire Smart rebates were issued, and a total of $62,500 has been allocated for this program in 2026. Residents interested in participating can begin to apply for a free home assessment at tnrd.ca/firesmart. And I'll now pass it over to Mr. Kelly for a few other updates.
Thanks, CEO Hildebrand, and good afternoon, everyone. Just 2 updates from my end for the board's information. Firstly, relating to advocacy, many of you would have seen an email regarding our meeting with the Minister of Forests, Ravi Parmar. That meeting occurred a few weeks ago. Topics discussed include sustainable invasive species funding, emergency egress, and community wildfire response groups, among a number of other topics raised during the roundtable discussion with the Minister. We feel that the Minister received our concerns, and we are looking forward to meeting with the Minister at our advocacy tour at the beginning of May. Ongoing concerns regarding the Agricultural Land Commission. Again, many directors may have seen that funding was cut to the Commission as part of Budget 2026. This is likely going to result in layoffs of staff. Of course, the Agricultural Land Commission and concerns regarding the Commission's process and timelines is a major priority, advocacy priority of the regional district, and just wanting to flag that things probably aren't going to get better anytime soon. A meeting has also been requested with the Federal Minister of Infrastructure to discuss local government infrastructure funding specific to the TNRD's small water utility systems. This is in addition to a meeting that has been requested with the Minister of Finance, Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs, and Minister of Local Government and Rural Communities, again at our advocacy tour coming up at the beginning of May, also to discuss small water utility system funding. As I mentioned, or have mentioned a few times, our advocacy tour will be taking place on May 6th and 7th in Victoria. We're just waiting to hear back for confirmation regarding our meetings that have been requested. And finally, just in addition, and I'll provide more context at the next board meeting, but just to flag for directors that budget consultation for budget 2026 is coming up from May 31st to June 20th. We'll have more details in April, but just wanting to flag as I know that there's been some discussions, particularly this morning, regarding budget cuts and reprioritization from the Ministry of Health. So just wanting to flag that there will also be an opportunity to provide in-person and written submissions in regards to budget 2026 through the provincial government. Finally, First Nations update, just to flag for the board that we have a number of upcoming meetings with First Nations throughout the regional district. We do have a joint review of our protocol agreement with Tk'emlúps, and we are also looking forward to a regional community-to-community forum with SIMP, which will be hosted in Valemount, and that's coming up in April. We're also in discussions with Whispering Pines, Clinton Indian Band, to host a C2C with them sometime in May, but dates are still being worked out. That's all, unless there's questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes, 6 of the 45 ALC employees have already been notified that their jobs are no more. And for the Fire Smart, I just wanted to note too that last year we had $500 was for any resident, up to $500 was for any resident, but that was restricted to the immediate zone, the 1.5 meter zone immediately out from your house. And then there was a $750 up to rebate available for seniors, which was the 30 meter zone all around your house. This year it's a single $1,000 up to $1,000 rebate, and it includes the entire 30 meters. So it's not restricted to that 1.5 meter immediate zone. That's obviously a concern, but I think that gives property owners a lot more scope to do some meaningful work on their property. So thank you very much to our Fire Smart, Karsten, our Fire Smart person and staff for thinking of that change. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. All right, the big one. 11.1.2 5-year financial plan report and bylaw. CAO Hildebrand, acting CFO Hildebrand is here to start things off.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Roden. Hopefully that works. Good afternoon, everyone. It's hard to believe that we're already at the end of the first quarter of 2026, but here we are. And before we get started, I wanted to take a moment and share my sincere gratitude and thanks to Austin, the entire finance team. This group has really stepped up without a full team complement and delivered to allow us to get to this critical point. So thank you and congratulations to them for everything they've done. I also want to thank all of our budget managers for a job well done. This is a huge, overwhelming task for many of our managers, and I'm sure they're all ready and waiting for getting it to attain the final board approval and deliver our goals for 2026. So to start, thanks to everybody involved. As you know, this budget is a massive, complex document. This is interconnected through approximately 120 services across the region. If you want to flip to the next page for me. We're presenting the 26th financial plan, and we want to start by outlining what we feel is new in both the presentation and the report package you received. There were some last-minute reports shared with directors earlier this week to provide a Coles Notes version that would help with providing more of a summary, and I hope that was useful. We're taking a very different approach to the budget discussion this year. Rather than repeating the full provisional budget, we're focusing on what changed between provisional and the final budget, why those changes occurred, and how they align with the board direction and priorities. You'll notice the presentation is designed to be much shorter and more decision focused. We'll move kind of quickly through the context, spend our time on key variances and drivers, and highlight where your feedback and earlier discussions directly shape the final numbers. The printed report is also formatted much differently to make it easier to navigate. So as we present, you'll see the same structure reflected in the document, with emphasis on areas that changed and the items requiring board consideration. Please note we are open to any and all questions and want to hear from you. So please don't hesitate to share your thoughts. From a priority standpoint, as a starting point, our budget work is guided by the priorities you communicated during the budget workshop and through subsequent board decisions. That's why many of our managers you'll see that's why many of the changes you'll see between the provisional and final budget are a direct result of the board feedback, either new direction, refinements to assumptions, or decisions made as we work through trade-offs together. One example of that was our recent committee of the whole, where I really thought that those were some great discussions which got us to some great results. As far as the priorities, they're pretty straightforward. We want to maintain service levels. We want to reduce expenses and find efficiencies, always contribute to reserves and make sure we're doing that appropriately, and then reduce taxation burden on our residents. At a high level, the 2026 financial plan we're bringing forward for your consideration includes the following totals. Total 2026 operating expenses is just over $63 million, and the total 2026 capital expenses is just over $18 million. Looking at the overall taxation impact, the total change from 2025 to 2026 is 5.3%. and equivalent to approximately $1.5 million in additional taxation. It is also not distributed evenly across the region. Electoral areas see a larger overall shift at 6.2% compared to 4.1% overall for the member municipalities. And I know Mr. Potts will certainly walk you through that change and that difference. Specified service areas within the electoral area directors also show an increase of 7.4%. However, that aggregate figure is less comparable because each area participates in different services, which is different for everybody. So I'd now like to pass it over to Mr. Potts. I know he's very excited to walk you through this presentation, is very well prepared. His team is here to support him and behind me, and he will answer any questions, as will I. So take it away, Austin.
Thanks, Scott. For the credit of Director Sarai, who was not here this morning, I'd like to let everybody know that I do have my new budget shoes. They are Florsheim shoes, which were purchased before the drama. Didn't want you to feel left out. So as Scott alluded, I do want to focus in this presentation on very high level what's changed between provisional and final. I know that you all know the provisional budget beaten to death, and I'm sure you're very well versed in it. So I feel it's more valuable with our time if we talk about what has changed since. High level at the provisional budget, we brought you a 6.7% increase. We're looking at a 5.3% increase now. And most of this difference is as a direct result of some of the work that we have done based on board direction between provisional and final to reduce that amount. Our total operating expenses went from 67 million down to 63 and change, just about 64. A large portion of that, however, though, is MFA differences. So I wouldn't focus too much on that number. I'll go into the actual differences. Overall, here's our $30.7 million in tax down to $30.3 million in tax. The first change there is our surplus difference. We tried to be very conservative with our surplus early in the year because we don't know what can happen. There's always the possibility that if we are overzealous with what we think will come in as surplus, we bring disappointment. In addition to that, at the provisional budget and throughout the rest of the year as well, we were asked by the board to focus on cost-saving measures, prudent spending, intelligent decision-making. And that shows, I think, really heavily in this number. This is a direct result of budget managers working hard to manage their budgets, and it shows in this $1.3 million additional surplus that we were able to bring. The next key difference is going to be in the reserve transfers, and I've put this right after the surplus intentionally because what we bring for the provisional budget for reserve transfers depends a lot on where we end up with our surplus and with our final interest income in the year. We are working towards maintaining the goals and reaching the goals that we have established in the reserve policy. And as we build out that plan, a big part of that is how much excess cash do we have available in some of these services. So when we're presenting the provisional budget, we may not know where we're going to be at for the amount of extra surplus that can be put into the reserve while still maintaining the health of the service. In addition to that, and we've discussed this a little bit before as well, the reserve transfers is something that we use, especially on the operating side, to help stabilize taxation. When we have a service that comes in with a very large unexpected revenue line, the good example of this is the building standards. If you have a lot of permit fee revenue in a year that we weren't expecting, we increase the contribution to reserve in following years to build up that operating reserve so that we can then strategically draw it down in the years after that where permit fees might be quite a bit lower. The wages change is made up of a few smaller things and two major ones. The first is a change that we've made to the classification of the utility services supervisor. When we look at our requirement as a regional district, especially when it comes to our core services, one of those core services is offering water and sewer access to residents that desire it. When we consider where we would be if we had zero water or sewer services, we would still need utility staff to be able to investigate those new services, to provide feedback to us. And in addition to that, also, it helps to reduce the burden a little bit on the utility services. So we've reclassified the wage for the utility supervisor so that it's coming out of the legislative budget instead of coming out of the individual services. The other change that's made up by that $330,000 is the change that was elected by the board for the 27 pay period versus 26 pay period strangeness. The other thing that we do too after the surplus is finished is look at each service and see what they were able to accomplish and what they weren't. In some of these cases, a surplus is a result of maybe an operating project that we wanted to do that just didn't end up happening during the year. In those cases, a good example would be the street lighting budget, where we may want to install new street lights, but due to BC Hydro or other issues, it gets pushed out. What that looks like in the budget is we carry forward a surplus and then we increase the expenses in the subsequent year. Everything that's in here as an operating change is something that's either been communicated directly with the directors that it influences or a project that was previously approved that we're moving out. The next change is the $243,000 that was increased from our revenue as a result of the changes to the solid waste fee structure. That one I hope is pretty straightforward. It's just a decrease to taxation as we increase the fees that we're collecting. In a similar vein, we have an extra $20,000 in revenue due to the changes that we made for permit fees. And these are both the changes that were requested by the board previously. All said and done, that brings us to a total taxation required for 2026 of $30.3 million. On the capital side, there's honestly not too much to talk about. The big thing that you'll probably notice is in 2026, we had a budgeted capital of $21.9 million, which is now $18.3 million. However, you'll see in 2027, that jumps. The 2027 provisional amount was $8.9 million, and the 2027 final amount is $12.4. The reason for that is capacity for capital projects. When we don't have capacity for a capital project, we have to move it out to the next year. It's an ongoing thing that we're seeing with our budgets where budget managers just don't have the capacity for all the capital that needs to be done, or the funding doesn't come through. If we are required to have a grant to fund a project and the grant doesn't exist or isn't approved, or maybe the deadline doesn't come around, we have to push that out to a future year. Other than that, largely you'll see in the other years, there's quite little change to the total capital. The next component of the budget that impacts our taxpayers is how the assessments shift. And from provisional, where when we present to you the provisional budget, we always use the prior year's revised roll file. By the time we present to you the final budget, we always have the current year completed roll. When we look at the assessment change by area, we can see that some areas are increasing more than others. Again, sorry, Ashcroft, only area that's gone down a little bit in assessment. The average total assessment change is 2.73. Anybody who's above a 2.73 average change will see a slight increase in their proportionate share of a regional cost. Anybody below will see a decrease in their proportionate share. When we look at the change in relative share, this is the difference in what different participants and services are paying for regional services. When we look at the total for everybody, you can see that the city of Kamloops had a 1.6% increase. But on this, it looks like a very, very large difference in their proportional share. Two things I'd like to point out is on $100,000 of tax requisition, this is $687. It's not a ton of money. And the other thing is the reason that the Kamloops number is so high on here is because they pay such a large share of our regional services. So when you have a slight shift in a participant who's paying 63% of your regional costs, you see almost an entire percent point in difference there. So what does that look like when we combine both of those things together, our budget changes versus assessment changes? This is what you're seeing for differences across your areas. As we expect, some of the areas with higher assessment changes, like Sun Peaks, are paying proportionally more. A great question that was raised this morning that I'll speak to is we look at the village of Lytton on here and we see a 26% increase, which looks a little bit scary. There's two major types of assessment change that we see. The first is when the value of existing properties increases. In those cases, the proportional share that that property is paying will increase. The other type of assessment change is a brand new property, a new taxpayer. When you have new taxpayers in an area, the proportional share for the overall tax base increases, but the per person amount doesn't change much. That's largely what we're seeing in Lytton as the city is beginning to rebuild and we have new parcels entering the fray. This here is the same information, but just presented slightly differently, just in case that's easier to look at. And here's the electoral area participants displayed in the same way. An interesting point that I would like to bring up here, this was asked by Director Grenier. When we look at some of these areas, we see a relatively large percent increase. And Director Grenier's area is a really good example of this because it looks like the percent increase is quite high. The reason that it looks so high is a combination of many factors, but the per resident amount for Director Grenier's area is actually only increasing by $1 and change. The reason that you have that difference is a variety of things. It could be a number of new assessment properties in the area that are taking on some of that burden. It can be because you have other property classes that are growing much faster than the residential class that take a proportionately higher share of the costs. In Director Grenier's area, that was actually the case where we had higher growth in the business class and higher growth in the utility class that took on a proportionally larger share of the total budget cost, which results in an overall budget increase of 5.3, but a lesser increase than that for specific residential taxpayers. I just want to go through some key takeaways on this. As we look at our budget as a whole and as we think about how we're utilizing reserves, it's important to remember that we do use reserves strategically. These reserves can be used to steady the decrease or increase in taxation depending on the goal of the directors, especially on the operating side where we may have a service that swings up and down, and reserves become a core part of the strategy for keeping the taxation stable. Solid waste and recycling is another example of such a service. When we look at our reserve and surplus policy, particularly our reserve policy, The reserve policy was introduced last year, and we are not in full compliance with it yet. We are working towards it, especially for services that have very, very large reserves or very, very small reserves. It's going to take us a few years, and we will work towards meeting those goals. And in cases where a service perhaps has a larger than necessary operating reserve, part of our plan over the next few years will be to utilize those reserves and help to bring some relief to taxpayers. In almost all of our budgets, taxation is the balancing mechanism. The case where this is not so is the utility fund, which is all user fee based. But in general, if other revenues are dropping, if we're losing fee revenue, if we're losing grant revenue, the only other place to flex is taxation. So then it becomes a discussion of, would the board like us to look at service levels? Do you want us to look at taxation levels? Or is there some other delivery method that we can use to still achieve service levels while keeping taxation relatively stable? Oftentimes that results in some type of trade-off where we're saying, do we need to increase fees in solid waste or reduce hours or come up with other strategic ideas that we can do? As time goes on, cost pressures continue to give us grief. There are costs that increase this year at a rate much higher than inflation that we really can't do anything about. Our insurance cost this year was 11.9% higher than it was last year. It's simply nothing that we can do about that, and it ends up putting undue pressure on budget managers who are being pushed to decrease costs, and then they do all of this work and an insurance bill comes in that they had no control over, and that can be very challenging. Another really good example is our cybersecurity costs, especially with the emergence of AI. Cybersecurity is a bigger and bigger concern that's increasing costs across the board. And finally, capital plan execution. I very briefly touched on this, but it's becoming more and more challenging as we have these growing requirements for capital. Our water systems are a good example, but without the capacity to execute the actual plan itself. This is why you see on the previous slide the $3 million in capital shifting to the following year, because there just, quite simply put, is no capacity to get the project done. We're hoping to counter some of that by having an asset manager and making strategic shifts in the responsibilities of staff. But at the end of the day, it's important to remember that our capital plan is what we would like to do, but not necessarily always what we can do given capacity. And with that, I will open the floor for questions.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Potts, CEO Hildebrand, for that very concise summary of a very, very, very long document. And thank you for sending the Coles Notes version to all of us. Questions and comments? All right, Director Laird, Director Grenier. Director Laird, start us off.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question around our reserve funds. You stated that there was some that were over and some that were under. Do you have any idea of the amount of funds that are too low or the ones that are too high? Is that a breakdown that we can do? Is it sometimes it's a little skewed as to the amount of money we need for each reserve fund? So is the ones that you're considering needing a top up, how many dollars do you think that is? And the ones that are too high, how much do you think you're going to decrease to get to our policy?
Through the chair, that's a great question. We have a document right now where we've done a review of each of our services. The review was done before our final numbers for audit came in and before we had our surplus calculations. So I would be hesitant to want to give you a number right now because I don't think it would be accurate. But I can definitely commit to bringing you a summary of that for the next Finance Committee meeting, where we can look wholesomely at our reserves and have a summary of which ones are in excess of what the policy dictates and which need additional contributions over the next 5 years or so.
Director Grenier?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Austin, for that presentation. I wonder if you could just put up the slide that showed the percentage increases of the EAs. and there was a similar slide for the municipalities. And I really find this quite interesting, and I think our constituents and I think the media would be interested in knowing this, that where we see these percentages. Thank you. Back to that one. That one would be great. So my area J, which is at the top in the middle, is indicating a 6.9% increase. And you would normally think, oh, gee, my constituents are going to have a 6.9% increase in their residential rate. In fact, for a number of reasons that Austin touched on, that actual increase when it comes to the residential taxpayer is 1.3%. So we have a lot of angst as we go through this budget process. Every year, we're looking at these numbers saying, yes, that's correct. The tax increase for Area J is going up 6.9%. But the actual impact for the residential taxpayer in Area J is 1.3%. And as Austin pointed out, that's because commercial and industrial taxpayers have carry a greater share as a multiplier, 3.5 times in some cases. And so the residential taxpayer is not carrying that full burden of 6.9. The other part is that we have areas that are growing. So we have an increase in expansion of the tax base. So there are more people carrying that increase of 6.9%. I did the analysis for all of the EAs, and the actual residential tax increase is from minus 1.0, so actual reduction in residential taxes, to an increase of 5.7%. So these are the increases in the dollars, but for the residential taxpayer, it's particularly muted. If you go to the municipal one, I did the numbers for the municipal one as well. And those increases are not the increases that municipal residential taxpayers will see. It is muted from what you see. So City of Kamloops, the actual increase is 1.8% for our residential taxpayer. And it's as low, City of Merritt is 0.05% for the residential taxpayer. It's quite remarkable when you look at that, that there is a significant difference. And I'm hoping that in years future, we might be able to point that out because our taxpayers are looking at these numbers. They're concerned that that's what they're going to see on their tax bill. It's not what they're going to see on their tax bill. So I appreciate you giving that explanation earlier.
Mr.
Two
Potts?
things to say. First, great point. We're actually including in our news release that we'll have out very shortly, I'm sure, a little table that will show you that number that Director Grenier has calculated for each one. So you can go on there and look at it. And then in addition to, great point, we will definitely include in our future report and presentations a similar looking slide, but with just the residential increase per person.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No. All right, we have a number of recommendations here. We'd like to move the first one. Director Sarai moves recommendation 1, seconded by Director O'Toole. This is introducing the 5-year financial plan bylaw and reading it for a first and second time. Any more comments? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Director O'Reilly, seconded by Director Karpuk. Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried. Director Ranta moves recommendation 3, seconded by Director Newstader. Mr. Potts? Pardon me? Before 4, okay. All right, so we've got number 3 moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried. Mr. Potts, you have something you'd like to add here?
Thank you. Recommendation number 4 is a new one that we've not done in the past, and I just want to provide brief context for why we're doing it this way. So our grant coordinator, Ainsley, does a lot of work every single year, writing up board reports for each CCBF project that we fund. It takes up a pretty significant amount of her time. And so we realized that the requirement from us to have a CCBF project approved by the board, it didn't require it to be in its own report. We just have to have something signifying that the board approved the CCBF expenditures. So what I've included in the board report is a summary of all the projects that are going to be funded from CCBF so that we can just approve it all at once and lessen the load a little bit on her so that she can focus on more value add activities.
Thank you. Before, Director Houghton moved that, Director Sarai moved that, seconded by Director Smith. Any discussion on this? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. 11.1.3 audited financial statements. Yes. I don't think they're floor chimes from the brief glimpse I got of them, but
No, sadly, they are not floor chimes.
and we welcome Mr. Parati from BDO Canada LLP.
Thank you for having me again. I'm disappointed that we have the slides up right away. I had some media-friendly jokes for Director Newstater ready to go, but so we're here this afternoon to go through this financial statements for the Thompson-Nicola Regional District for the year ended December 31st, 2025, and also the audit results. And, you know, before we jump into it, a couple of opening remarks. First, in your agenda packages, you will have had the full financial statements and my full audit findings report. In the interest of time, we're going to do a PowerPoint to walk through the main highlights. And also want to reiterate, I know this morning was a lot briefer, being the hospital district has less going on than the regional district, but this is your opportunity to ensure that you're satisfied with the work that myself and my team has done as your auditors, because we work at the pleasure of the board. While we work directly with management, we are accountable to the board under the Community Charter and the Local Government Act. So this is what today's meeting is for. And we'll start with our audit opinion. I'm pleased to report we will be issuing a clean opinion again this year. So in our opinion, these financial statements do present fairly the results of the TNRD for the year ended December 31st, 2025. Now, when we get into the numbers themselves, you will have noticed some big numbers showed up on the face of the financial statements. And I'm going to come to that in the next slide. But I want to talk about your financial position. Some of these numbers will not tie directly to the financial statements because I've backed out the changes for Municipal Finance Authority that we proposed so that we can understand what truly happened with your financial position this year. So where we landed is your financial assets, being the measure of all the cash you have and cash that will be coming in, remained fairly flat, down about $500,000 and landed just under 62 million. Your liabilities that could settle within the next year, so this excludes your asset retirement obligations, this excludes your long-term debt, fairly consistent year over year. And so your net financial assets, excluding those items, is $55 million year over year, up or down $500,000 this year from last year. And we'll talk about how that landed and why it landed in a few slides. But that money, this number really represents, here's what I have in my operating surplus and what I have in my reserves. That's what you truly have. And understanding that, you know, if you're wearing your municipality hat as a councillor or mayor, you have one service area in your municipality. Here we have multiple service areas. So that number is always going to seem like it's a little bit higher because we don't want to borrow from one to the other. Now, if we deduct from the TNRD's portion of Municipal Finance Authority debt and asset retirement obligations, we come to the net financial asset position, down 1.5 million from last year, 30 million last year, and 28.4 million this year. Now, you'll have to bear with me for a moment. We do need to do a little bit of accounting talk. You'll have noticed on the statements, if you compared them this year versus last year, that we have due from member municipalities and member municipality debt showing up, Municipal Finance Authority deposits. The way that this has been presented across the province has been fairly inconsistent, and typically it hasn't been material to the financial statements. But when we look at it, and there's a big change coming for the 2027 year in terms of the financial reporting, as a firm, we wanted to make sure that everybody got consistent, at least within our client base, in terms of how this should be accounted for. Just so that when we make the changes, and I won't get into the headaches that under the new standards, what it would cause, just so that we're prepared. So the due from member municipality number, this is the total amount of borrowing from the member municipalities across the TNRD area, shown here. And then we have a corresponding liability to the MFA for that amount. So it's an in and out, and because when a municipality borrows, they come to the regional district during the windows, say, hey, we need to borrow this. Regional district applies to MFA, money comes back to the regional district, goes to municipality. We do have an asset and a liability. And so it is shown on the statements. I prefer not showing it because it skews what your results are in terms of the financial assets, which is why on this slide I took it out. But the correct accounting is to have the asset and the liability. Zero impact on your surplus or position. The next portion, and on the hospital district, it was being done this way, but it wasn't being done this way on the regional district. And again, it's been inconsistent across the province, is that when you borrow from MFA, they withhold 1% of the debt and put it into the debt reserve fund so that if somebody fails, there's money to cover it, which is why you get better debt ratings. And also, this debt reserve fund is what funds those actuarial earnings that reduce your debt. So the total MFA deposits shown in the top line, that is the 1% being held for the entire regional district and all member municipalities. The member municipality deposits then get backed out because they are not the TNRDs, and we have a net $35,000 amount to your surplus that changed this year. And it's a change in your capital fund, so it's not $35,000 that you now have to offset the tax rate. It's just in your capital fund because it's not truly cash until the debt is settled. Any questions on that before I move on?
Director Grenier?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the explanation. On the MFA deposits, who gets the interest on those deposits, MFA or TNRD and member municipalities?
Through the chair to the director. So that when we talk about the actuarial earnings that we see on the statement of operations, that's the return on investments that's offset against your debt every year. So the MFA earns interest on it, and then they reduce your debt correspondingly for it. So you do get that back indirectly.
Director O'Reilly?
Thank you, Chair. Just diving into it a little bit deeper, why do we need to have that, or why does it have to happen? It's not just us, but province-wide, when we can only borrow based on to a certain maximum percentage based on a muni or an RD, based on our guaranteed tax revenue that we know we have coming in. So there would never be a default. And so I'm wondering why that insurance is in place in general.
So through the chair to the director, and that is the exact question on why there has been this issue across the province, because when you have it, you get this 1% that they withhold, and they use that as security because they're not securing the infrastructure. So that's why MFA does it, to help get better rates when they take these debentures to New York or wherever they go to get it. So it's an improvement in rates. But that's why, and in the past, what has been done is effectively you'd recognize the asset, so that 1%, which is truly your money that you get back when the debt is settled. And then there's this contingent demand note that would offset and net it to zero. But that demand note is only there if you default. So there isn't a triggering event. So what we've done is actually shown the reality that you have this money out there that you're going to get. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Nope. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So moving to the statement of operations now. And so we have the comparison of budget to actuals. And again, the numbers that I'm going to quote here, you'll notice that there's about $14.5 million in member municipality debt payments, member municipality actuarial earnings, and then the offsetting expense. Nets to zero. So I'm going to quote the numbers that are excluding that because for the same reason like we talked about, we have to show the in and the out. So your budgeted revenues were 44.7 million for the year. They came in at $46.9 million. And as we look at the chart across, we can see that there isn't really anything that was drastically out of line in terms of where things went. So really, overall, a fairly stable year. And again, like to emphasize just how much closer over the past 3 years I've been seeing the budget and actuals for the regional district, and I'm not surprised in seeing these results. And when we look at the breakdown on revenues, why Mr. Potts spent so much time on taxation, 29.5 million of your 44 million or 46 million of the revenue that you earned, so nearly 2/3 is showing up as tax. When we look at the expenses had a budget of 49.7 million, came in at 44.2 compared to last year at 44.1 million. And again, very tight to budget across. We see a little bit of an overage in general government services, a little bit under in the library services. But the big one is the third set of columns, and that is community and emergency services. And given the lighter fire year, I think that we are all very happy to see that number down. And with the news this year about that we're in the Goldilocks phase and the snowpacks was announced, hopefully this continues on that way. So I think we all can appreciate that. Expenses break down by segment, and for Director Blackwell, yes, I'll knock on wood as well. And this just shows as a pie chart where that 44 million and change is broken down. So now the surplus. And this is the part where I get to remind you again this year that the way that you're required to prepare the financial statements under public sector accounting standards does not line up with how the province wants you to prepare your budget under the Local Government Act and the Community Charter. So again, I've pulled together this slide with some of the numbers that you would have to do a bunch of add and subtracting to get to them from the financial statements. But here's how I can show you how you actually did against the budget that you approved. You had budgeted a deficit of $4.9 million and you came in at $2.8 million surplus this year. But it was also going to be, and to Mr. Potts' point on reducing the capital budget for 2026, you can see that you planned for 24.4 million in capital projects and came in at 9.3. And that's the reality, is a capacity issue on trying to get the capital projects done. We add back your amortization and then we come down, and surplus before your interfund transfers came in at a deficit of 1.685, but you had planned for a $29 million deficit. And that $29 million deficit was going to be funded from reserves. Capital projects didn't go ahead as planned. And so we can see that we only needed to take $500,000 from our reserves this year. And so we ended up at a deficit of $595,000 versus a planned break even. Keeping in mind that's less than 1% out from what your total revenue source is. So again, there's a little bit of math that we do in the background to make this work, but this is how you did against your budget. So now we're going to talk about the surpluses and reserves. And when I'm presenting these statements, I like to start with, you have an accumulated surplus of $97 million, which represents all the wealth that the regional district has. But on the first slide, I talked about that we only had $54 million in the bank. So what we do is we take the accumulated surplus and we're going to back out the capital reserve. And so this is money that has been earmarked for capital projects in the future, $26 million. If we take that out, we're now left with $70.5 million. We then go to the next page and go, okay, here's the reserves that we set aside for operating. Some of them are by agreement, like the Community Works Fund, COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant, and some others. That's $15 million of that 54 million. So now we've accounted for about $40 million of that 54 million. We back that out and we're left with $55 million of surplus, which takes us to the last slide on surplus. And this is what we have in unrestricted. $55 million made up of three numbers: investment in your tangible assets, investment in the Strata Corp, and other. The first two numbers represent what you've historically spent on your assets and your infrastructure, less your debt, less your asset retirement obligations. That's not cash. The other of $12 million, that's what's in your unrestricted general and utility funds that management uses to execute on the budget that you've approved. So we talked about just over $40 million in reserve funds that you have. We add the $12 million to it, we're about $53 million, which ties pretty close to that 54 million that I talked to you about at the start. So you can see that of that 54 million, management has 12,000 or 12 million that they're able to use to execute on the budget as money comes in. So I'm going to pause there on the financial statements before I get into the audit results and ask if there's any questions on the statements. And again, happy to answer anything from the statements, even if I didn't cover it in the presentation.
Director Grenier?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I have a question. I have a question about note 15 and the way you phrase it. And I think you've said it again in your presentation today. And when I read the note 15, it says the financial plan was not budgeted in a manner consistent with PSAS, but has been adjusted in the financial statements to conform with PSAS requirements. And when I first read that, I thought, are we departing from GAAP? Are we departing from proper standards? I had a conversation with our CFO, and no, we're not. But this is bridging the gap between the financial plan and this presentation. But the wording caused me concern. And I think the wording will cause our constituents concern. They will want to know that we are conforming, or our financial statement, our audited opinion is clean. And so I'm wondering if there's a better way to say what you say there. In the hospital board statement, you say it differently, and you give an explanation of why there is a difference. And I'm wondering if we should be changing, or asked to be changed, the notation to say to aid the reader or something to that effect, so that it isn't staff and the accountants fighting. It's something that they agree with. That statement doesn't seem to suggest that. I wonder if you could comment on that.
So through the chair to the director, there is a bit of a fight on this one, and it is that the way the province requires you to prepare your budget bylaw and the way the Public Sector Accounting Board requires you to present the statements are two different pieces of regulations. And I say tongue in cheek that there is a battle. I have voiced my displeasure with Public Sector Accounting Board directly that they don't require us to adjust for reserve fund transfers in these financial statements, which is what is the key piece that's missing. And I mean, if it's the board's pleasure, we can revise this to, more clearly state that the way, if the preference is the hospital districts, we can do that on this one, or we can make that a note for next year, however the board's pleasure is. But the reality is that these financial statements need to show the budget in accordance with public sector accounting standards, not in accordance with the community charter, which is why I also showed this slide like this, because I'm trying to show this. It needs to be shown the other way for it to be useful to you. But the standards tie our hands in terms of we have to show it the way that the accounting standards are. So that's the push-pull that we have that we're dealing with.
Supplemental to that, I understand that. We're hearing the explanation from you here today, but somebody that's picking this up separately may not be able to understand that. And so I think there is a difference. I would hope there's a better way to explain the difference so that you don't come to the determination that we're departing from standards, which I think is what everybody wants to see, that we're not departing from standards at the end of the day.
So then I'll ask the board chair, what is the board's pleasure on this? Would you like us to adjust the wording? Director Grenier has indicated that the wording in the hospital district, I can make that change before we hit print, or we can table this and make a note to adjust it for next year. So I'll open it up to the board.
I would like to see the change effective on this one, so we don't face any questions about this one, if that's what my fellow directors would like.
And you would like a change to what is in the hospital board?
Something that tracks the hospital board, which explained why there was the difference. This one just says there's a difference and it doesn't explain it. So,
Do we need a motion, Corporate Officer Jeremiah?
Thank you. Good question. If Mr. Perotti would prefer a motion to direct that change. Sorry.
Through the director, we can approve a motion, like for the motion to approve the statements subject to the changes discussed on note 15. That would be sufficient, and then allow for the CFO to approve the change and make sure that it's in line with what was asked for.
Thank you, Director Grenier.
the second point that I'd like to raise also in the notes, and I don't know if you want to get to it later, but I'll just raise it and then you can advise. You make a note about the two schedules at the end of the report, and they're unaudited. And that was a practice that you followed last year. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, everything here is audited except those last two statements. And the last statement, well, the second last statement is a $94,000 item. And then the other one is a $5.7 million item, but you actually go into some detail about the 5.7, which departs from last year. And I'm thinking, instead of describing it up above as unaudited, why don't you just audit it as part of your procedure? Then there's no question about these two schedules. So I don't know, maybe there's a reason why you didn't audit them, but it seems to me that it's a departure from everything else in this statement.
Through the chair to Director Grenier, and again, this is something the province and I don't see eye to eye on, and I've raised it with municipal affairs. The province introduced, started with the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant, and they've done this as well with the Growing Communities Fund, a requirement to show a unaudited statement attached to the financial statements. And the reason why they said that in the funding agreement that it is allowed to be unaudited is that for us to audit it, we can't use the overall materiality that we use for the regional district. We have to drop down because the province is requiring that statement. So we have to audit that statement as if that's the only thing that's there. And so that's our standards that we deal with. So it creates an incremental cost for something that there's two specific grants that the province has decided they want to see on the financial statements, and the other 30 grants that you receive aren't required to be on the financial statements. And so they're asking for something else, and they've given the leeway to not have us audit it because they recognize the cost. But I think that you include all the schedules for all the grants, or you have none of them. That's my personal view, but that's the reason why it's not being done. And it's in the funding agreements that they acknowledge that it does not need to be audited.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point? Mr. Perotti.
Thank you. So now we're going to move into the audit results themselves, and we'll talk about how it went. And I first want to open up, similar to CAO Hildebrand's comments, thanking management this year. As we know that there was some transitions in staff throughout the year, management was very proactive in communicating with us, making sure that we were still aligned on timelines, expectations, and we were able to get here as we normally would. We didn't have to push this to the April meeting or to the May meeting. So a big credit to the team here. So as of today, we are substantially complete. We have now received our assigned management letter, and we've completed our subsequent event work, which are procedures that have to be done today. The only thing left for us to sign off on the audit is approval of the financial statements by the board. And in terms of the audit findings, again, we came in last October, and we identified what had changed within the regional district, how we need to change our audit approach, and given the change in audit approach and changes in the district, what we expected the audit results to be. Everything came in line with expectations again this year. In terms of the larger areas of risk, two on here, I'm going to speak to three of them. The first area, recognition of grant revenue and government transfers. Again, very complex area. The province is getting more and more creative in how these agreements are coming in, which is making it harder and harder to audit and for management to decide, is this deferred revenue? If it's unspent, is it a reserve fund? How do we deal with it? But again, we didn't have any issues based on our testing, and happy to report that everything came in as planned. The next area, and even though I didn't put it on here because it is a big number, is your tangible capital assets. We spend a lot of time on your capital projects, not just looking at the additions. We look at the budgets, we look at the tenders, we look at the purchase order system, making sure that everything's aligned on these larger spends. And again, did not have any issues there. The last area is management override of controls. So again, the acknowledgement that senior leadership in any organization can influence and circumvent the control environment creates the opportunity for fraud. So we have our targeted procedures there, and we didn't identify any issues. But I do need to ask the board if you do have any concern over fraud within the organization.
Any hands? No one has anything here. Thank you. Okay.
Perfect. It's a good thing. Everyone looks up and to the left. I'm happy. So internal control matters. So of course we come in and we look at, and I always am a firm believer looking at your systems instead of individual transactions gives us better assurance. And when we do that, if we see anything that we can have in terms of recommendations, we make sure that we flag it. We didn't have anything of significance to bring forward. The one thing that I will bring up, though, that I have discussed with the finance team is that you are moving towards getting a new ERP system, a new IT system for your finance side. And, as a part of that, right now we have the senior finance people are the ones who are the super users in the system. So that kind of lets them, when we talk about management override of controls, that's how they can get away with that. Again, there's other processes that you have and controls that mitigate it, but really want to encourage that as a part of going down that path and developing a new system to keep this in mind and see how we can move it away from them because it'll better safeguard you. Not that we're concerned now, but I think setting it up for the future is very, very important in that area. So in summary, everything went to expectations. We didn't have to deviate from our approach. The internal controls, we didn't have anything significant to bring forward, and we did our testing on senior leadership, including the board, and did not identify any issues within that. And I will stop there for any other questions.
Thank you. Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question on payables and receivables. Everything seemed in line. I've asked that question of management, but from an auditor perspective, everything seemed in line, payables and receivables. And I wonder if you could just, for my education, on note 13, it does talk about transfers and other grants, and there's a revenue received in 2025, and there seems to be a difference, and I just can't understand that. So I just wonder if you could explain that.
Okay, so before we get into the note, through the chair to the director, when we look at payables and receivables, we have two things that we look at. We look at what the process and controls are that get, whether it's a payable or receivable, into the system, and then how it gets out of the system. And so we do compliance testing on that to make sure that the controls are there. And then if we have any large balances on, a random vendor that's doing construction or capital, we'll look at those invoices, of course. And then we do trend analysis on, in addition to the testing, on things like vacation accruals, property taxes, receivable, utilities receivable, and that. And again, we didn't propose any adjustments in those areas based on our testing. With regarding to, yeah, oh, you have it, perfect.
Through the chair to the board, the difference that you're seeing on that note is really an accounting difference of recognition of revenue that we received in past years. So we saw a really, really significant movement this year with the Pritchard capital projects. Those were, we received a lot of that money, about $7 million, I believe, upfront from the government to put towards that. So when we receive it, at that point, it's deferred until we meet the recognition requirements. This last year, $2.7 million of that money that was previously received was recognized So on that note, it wasn't received this year, but it was recorded as revenue this year.
So it's not an outstanding amount. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? No? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Parati. All right, we do have a recommendation. Move the recommendation, subject to the change to note 15.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by, moved by Director Middleton, seconded by Director Grenier. That the 2025 consolidated financial statements of the Thompson-Nicola Regional District be accepted, subject to the change on note 15. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. We move on to 11.1.4, District of Clearwater, District of Barrier, Village of Cache Creek, Official Community Plan, Regional Context Statements. We have 3 recommendations. Director Smith moves recommendation 1, seconded by
Second.
Vice Chair Smith. Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Director Bass moves number 2, seconded by Director Blackwell. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Director Ranta, seconded by Director Sarai. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Community Resiliency Investment Program 2026 Fire Smart Community Funding Winter Spring Closed Intake.
Move the recommendation.
Vice Chair Smith, thank you. Seconded by Director Houghton. Any discussion on this? No? No. Director Karpuk.
Just a quick question. As a resident, or at least owns a person who owns property in Area A who would be interested in participating in this program, should I be voting in favor of this or recusing myself from this vote?
That's a really good question. Corporate Officer Jeremiah, do we have any thoughts on this?
Do you feel that you would be, sorry, apparently I have a cold. Do you feel that you would be in a direct or indirect pecuniary interest with the matter of this vote?
All depends whether I get a grant from this. So I'm going to just not vote on this matter and leave it up to my colleagues. I don't know if I need to recuse myself, but I'll just abstain from a vote.
It's a great question. Actually, directors are not allowed to abstain from voting, so you would need to recuse yourself and just cite your reason.
I will recuse myself as I am interested in applying for this program.
Thank you.
Director Sarai?
Yeah, thank you. If I can just get some clarification, so the area directors, would they not all be able to access this?
Pardon me?
Would all the area directors would not be able to access the Fire Smart if it's available in their area?
I guess.
Chair Roden, that's exactly what I just asked the corporate officer because we all live in the regional district. So it's
I think any director who lived in an electoral area, they would be the only ones obviously who could benefit from this. No, not a director who lived in a municipality. So presumably the 10 electoral area directors and any municipal directors who might reside in or own property in an electoral area for which they might be seeking this funding. So, pardon me? Really only if you're planning on applying for the funding. Mr. Vieira, can you bring clarification?
I'll provide some clarification that this recommendation is only for the board to direct staff to apply for the program. It has nothing to do with awarding any individual grants to any property owners. I think that context might help. I see.
All right, we have clarified, Director Karpak, that you don't have to recuse yourself from this. Are there any other questions or comments? On the question, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. We have, for your enjoyment and edification, the building permit activity report for February. Anyone have any comments on that? We have the draft minutes from the Finance Committee and the Committee of the Whole on March 5th and February 13th respectively. Anyone have any comments on those? No? All right. Now we do have an additional item of correspondence here. Correspondence for action, and that is regarding a request for a letter of support from Tourism Kamloops. There was supporting documentation, and we do have a suggested draft letter.
And Chair, if I can, I'm a voting member of Tourism Kamloops who made this request, so I am going to recuse myself.
Thank you. That seems very clear cut. Thank you. So would someone like to make a motion? Director Morris. Move that we send a letter of support for Tourism Kamloops. Seconded by Director Middleton. Thank you. Any discussion on this? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That is carried. All right, we come to item 14. We have new business, and we have new business from Director Grenier regarding the Ma'atimuk solar project. Ma'atimuk means letting in the light, letting in the daylight, for anyone who is interested. So Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. This project was presented to us last fall. There was a presentation online. This was also discussed, Director Houghton and other directors, and I discussed this with BC Hydro at the UBCM. And our concern at that time, there was proposals, energy proposals, windmills, solar plants, and there seemed to be a number of them that were being proposed for our region. And BC Hydro at the time assured us that they were at the very beginning of their process, that there would be lots of opportunity for public consultations and discussions. And I guess I came away from that meeting with some assurances on that. At the end of our last board meeting a few weeks ago, along came this correspondence. And this came in, I think it was on a Friday. But it came in asking if we want to participate on the Monday Zoom call meeting. And staff were unable because they were booked up. I participated. I put together a list of questions. There was about 20 government people on this environmental assessment board. And they were trying to determine whether an environmental assessment was even necessary. And I pointed out that they were asking for a response by tomorrow. And I said, well, we're only able to deal with it right now. I don't have a board meeting until today, but it seems that that's pretty quick. And I was told that it's on the Premier's favored list, this whole expedited approval. And so I said, I think that we need some more time. So one of the things that I'll be wrapping this up with is the request to go in for tomorrow that if you think it's appropriate, that we get some more time to deal with this. But I'm a little bit more concerned than that. The proposal is for a solar plant in Area J, just north of Logan Lake. It's situated on, the first phase is 500 acres. The second phase is 600 acres. There's now a third phase that would extend down, I think, right down to the Logan Lake municipal boundary and in a broader area. And I asked the question on the Zoom call, have you been in touch with constituents and with landowners? They said they were going to advertise. They said, yeah, they had tried, as they had said before, that they had reached out to tenure holders, in this case, the local rancher, that this has been in their ranching area for almost 100 years. And when I spoke to the local rancher yesterday morning, they were not happy about this. They have a meeting scheduled for the first week in April to discuss this more. But this is taking place in our area. We are land use managers at local government level. And this is phase 1 and phase 2 alone are bigger than the whole footprint of Tobiano that went through 5 years of public consultations. I'm not suggesting that 5 years of public consultations is appropriate, but I do think that our constituents should be aware of what's being proposed, what the longevity of it is, in this case, 40 years of solar panels on an 1,100 acre footprint. What would that entail? How would that be done? How would it be removed? What impact? A number of questions. And I don't think that we can just sort of, I think we're being asked to pass on our responsibilities to the Environmental Assessment Office, and I don't think that that is acceptable for our constituents. So I'm asking you as, and I raised this yesterday at the EA board, I would ask that we approve 2 motions for consideration, and apologies to Director Lepso. I know he doesn't like these last minute things, but we have to respond perhaps by tomorrow. The first is to ask for an extension, more time to respond to the proposal. That would be the first. And the second would be to direct staff to bring draft recommendations to both the policy committee and the EA for something like this proposal. We are hearing that we're going to get more of these applications. They seem to be very large scale applications. Perhaps they're great for our area, but perhaps there's other considerations as well. And I think we need time for our constituents to hear about it, to be able to respond to it, for our staff to give us great input on it. And I just don't think that we're getting that under the current process. So I'm hoping that you might agree with me and support this kind of a motion.
So your first motion would be that the board write a letter asking them to postpone the deadline for submissions regarding this?
With respect to TNRD, an extension, it says on the top of page, the second page, it says due March 27, 2026, review of the initial project description and engagement plan. And I just don't think that our staff have had an opportunity to properly comment on our behalf or to even consult with us on what they would recommend. So yes, ask for an extension for more time to respond to the EAO. That would be the first part.
Okay. Okay, so moved by Director Grenier, seconded by Director Thorpe, that the board write ask for an extension to the deadline for the review deadline. Okay, thank you. Any more discussion on this? Vice Chair Smith and then Director Laird and Director Getz.
So I'm struggling with this on many fronts. I had an opportunity to participate in a provincially ran session, I guess it was yesterday actually, on the EA process and the proposed expedited process and what that could potentially look like. But this particular project has been on my radar and has been presented to our council at least 2 times in the last couple of years. They have had open houses within the municipality. And I think that part of the comments that I made to the EA, and that's Environmental Assessment Office, is many times I don't think the general public knows, or particularly, I mean, they care when it's going in their backyard, but as far as participating in the process, there's so many of these projects happening in our region right now. I've attended open houses on multiple projects, not just this one, and nobody attends, I'm telling you. Like, you will go and there'll be 6 people waiting there to answer any questions that anybody might have, and nobody attends. So I think that it's not fair for us to say they're not doing the consultation. I think that it has to be done in a way that helps the general public to understand what's happening in their backyard, and not in a way that is complicated to them. And I don't know how to get that across, but I don't think this particular project is even planned to be complete until about 2029, if I'm correct. So we are still quite a few years out. There's plenty of time for them to continue to do their consultation. But I think that the general public, there's not a lot of uptake when the proponents do go out to consultation. Even our own staff goes out to consultation, and we struggle to get buy-in from the general public. So I guess I struggle because I think that the onus to some degree is on residents to participate and to pay attention and to be a part of the process. Anyways, that's just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Laird.
Thank you, Chair. Just through to Alex, why is it that the TNRD does not have any control over zoning in that area? Because it seems to me it is in the middle of nowhere, but we do control zoning right through all the regional districts. So why wouldn't we not control zoning there? If we did control zoning, then these answers would all be answered before it moves forward.
Through the chair, the answer to that lies in the Provincial Utilities Commission Act. So that legislation elevates all these projects to a level where the act says that it supersedes all local government zoning. And so that's why we do have an old standing clean energy policy that the board had that acknowledged that we have this limitation, but that staff were to provide whatever comment we could. The change here now is that the process used to take longer. We'd get a referral. We could have time to bring a report to the board. And now, because everything's been streamlined with the new Streamlining Act from April of last year, we don't even have time to attend and or get a report to the board agenda before the time is closed for input. So they're asking for our input, but we don't have zoning powers because of provincial legislation.
Is this similar to the Mining Act where we have no jurisdiction over where a mine goes? That similar type legislation?
Similar legislation, different wording, but it's the same idea that the province has paramountcy over the local government.
Thank you.
I have Director Getz, CEO Hildebrand, Director Thorpe, Director Houghton. Director Getz.
I think for myself, I think Director Smith and I have been to 5 of these over the last 4 years. There was going to be one just out of Douglas Lake, one out of Upper Nicola, one out of between Princeton and Merritt, all these open houses and stuff like that. These things come and go. A question I have for you to Director Grenier, are you looking for something by tomorrow?
For clarity, the EAO office is looking for something by tomorrow. And when I asked that question, they said, well, they'd be prepared to defer if we needed more time. And in response to the question about consultations, the proponent said we had open houses in Logan Lake. I said it's in Area J. We've had open houses in Kamloops. I asked if you had contacted the actual people that live on Tonkwell Lake Road. They said that they would advertise that they would contact people within a certain radius. I spoke to the actual tenure holder, the rancher, who's quite upset about the whole thing, wanting an opportunity to hear more about it. And the proponent is only getting around to speaking to that person in April, even though they made a presentation several months ago. And I asked specifically at that meeting, have you been in touch? So I think that there's somehow a gap here, and I'm not opposed to a proposal. I'm concerned that we don't have enough input for our rural residents. If nobody shows up, that's an indication.
Fantastic.
If lots of people show up, that's an indication.
So I guess my question would be protocol. So this is a notice of motion. We can't talk about this for 2 weeks, correct? Because of public, we have to have the public have the ability to respond to it. So would this not have to be a 2-week situation?
Given the fact that it's a timely manner, we've done this under new business so that we are avoiding the notice of motion process.
So next I have CAO Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair. Just to provide a staff perspective as well, this is a very frustrating process because we are, to Director Smith's comment or Vice Chair Smith's comments, is like there's so many of these coming at us that it's like we all get these emails. Alex gets them, admin gets them, Jamie gets them. Like they come in just blasts of emails, and we don't know who's going and who's not going. What we thought we would do is Corbin and I had talked about this, where anything with the EAO office, we want to make him the primary contact so that we get this information so that we can properly then communicate it to the policy group or have a written statement that's endorsed by the board that we can say, here's the consultation that we want. Because if we had to go to all of these meetings, we would not be in this office for weeks at a time sometimes because there are just so many of them. So just wanted to provide perspective because this is important. I'm just not sure how we manage it.
Thank you, Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. So I think that Director Grenier's second part of that motion spoke to developing a policy. So I think that might be dealt with. I can speak on behalf of what has happened in Area I. There was a proposal for a solar energy project up in North Road area, which is just out of Logan Lake. That was about 2 years ago. And I know that a North Road resident did attend the meeting in Logan Lake. I attended the meeting in Logan Lake. There was also a meeting held Lytton First Nations, ironically enough. So they were doing Indigenous consultation as well. There was nothing set up for the local area residents. A lot of them were unaware. And the cattle company that had range rights up there, they were unaware as well. And so what happened is that I did reach out to this solar energy company, and we did have a meeting with the residents that lived along North Road. Now, I kudos to the energy company for meeting with us, but I think pretty well somebody from every household on that road showed up because they wanted to know what was going on. The cattle company, actually, that's why I excused myself earlier. That was the gentleman that showed up to that meeting at North Road. Everything seems to be on hold for now, but it took extra effort to make sure that the really rural residents knew what was happening. So I think asking for an extension so that we have some time and that people have input, the people that are most affected by this, I think it's important, as is developing a policy to deal with this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Houghton.
Remember, we've had a couple of these folks come to the board. I think you remember that both times I've asked them, have you been in consultation with the tenure holder of the grazing rights of the land? And they both look at each other and kind of look at me. And I think I've said, even talk to Kevin Boone at BC Cattlemen's, work together on this project because you're impacting somewhere. Somebody's got range rights on that land. Doesn't matter where you go in BC, in the interior. And not once have they reached out to the tenure holder. It's up to them to go to them, whether it be a range right holder, maybe it's a recreation club, has some trails through there, maybe mining claims or whatever. It's up to them to go to them and seek their input. It's not up to everybody to come to a meeting. It's up to them to go to them, and they haven't done their due diligence. I mean, they didn't do anything on that one that they're going to put through Westwold, Monty Lake to Falkland. The first thing you know, the Minister of Energy's up there saying he's approved 8 projects, and that was one of them. And I got more phone calls than anything. And what the heck's going on here? We haven't even had a chance to to give any input. So I think to the rural residents' sake, they need to be more properly addressed by them in whatever fashion, because it's slam dunk, shove these things through. The first thing you know, you're going to have in years' time 1,100 acres of solar panels that are going to look like you know what, and the land's not going to be used by anybody else. So is that what we want? It's up to the rural residents to have a say. I mean, we put a drilling rig in Keekwillie Park to try and find some water for the neighbors, and cripes, all the neighbors come on, what the heck's going on here? Well, they were concerned, and so should they be. And they should be have the right in the back door of where these things are going. And I agree with Director Grenier. Thank you.
Thank you. So we do have the initial motion on the table, and that is to write asking for a postponement. That the consulting period be extended to give us a chance to respond. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Now, the second one should, because the second one is not necessarily time sensitive in that it does not have a deadline for tomorrow, should this more properly be a notice of motion? Which is, I gather from talking to Director Grenier, going to be to directing staff to come back to policy and EA committees with some proposals about dealing with these situations going forward. So is that more properly dealt with as a notice of motion?
We can definitely do that. We could have a notice of motion be brought back to the April meeting. I just do want to address the timeliness of this as well, because we only have one policy and governance meeting that will be coming up in May. So if there is a decision that will be made, it will be made at the same time as the policy and governance meeting, where the final decision is going to be.
Well, could the notice of motion be considered, could this be considered the notice of motion? And so then the actual notice, would appear on the April 16th meeting?
If the chair wishes that to be like that, I'm sure we could do that.
Would that give then April 16th to, when is the policy committee in May?
12th or 13th of May?
Would that give, Mr. Kraus, would that give staff enough time to do something, or would the extra 3 weeks between now and April 16th be appreciated?
We can make either work, the chair.
That was not quite as helpful as it might have been. I will just say. So Director Laird.
I listened to Scott's comments, and I think he's absolutely right. You have to have some sort of information to hand out to the presenters that come for all these different new events that most of us aren't familiar with, where these are what we are asking you to do when you make a presentation to the board. And I thought that was an excellent idea. So when they show up, you can give them, this is what we're expecting from you. But to deal with this one, I think we need to deal with it right away. And that could go to the policy meeting where we can look and see what kind of information we want to ask from these presenters before we get to where we're at right now, where the government is basically overridden anything that comes from the regional district.
All right, so bearing in mind that this should more properly be brought as a notice of motion, and I don't want to be setting any precedents, but since there seems to be broad consensus in the room that we do need to develop some sort of direction to come back to policy committee, which will be in the middle of May. So I would suggest that to give staff as much time as possible to prepare something fulsome, that we go ahead with a motion today, not a notice of motion, but a motion. And Director Grenier, if you could please just read out to us what you're proposing.
Direct staff.
Nope, oops, time it. CAO Hildebrand.
Sorry, thank you. Just to think one more step through that is we would be willing to actually send out an informal survey to the 27 directors so that we have a consensus on what we're having. So we're then prepared for the policy meeting to make a decision, if that makes sense.
Thank
So
you.
if you want to maybe have a motion that kind of tailors that, it would be more efficient.
Okay, Director Grenier.
That we direct staff to bring recommendations to the policy and EA committee after canvassing directors through through some kind of communication survey.
Corporate Officer Jeremiah?
Just to clarify, I believe we were just mentioning the policy committee. You would like the EA committee as well?
I think
it does
the
impact all.
policy and EA committee, because these are actually taking place in electoral areas and there are multiple ones. I think that the input from both committees would be quite useful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so that's moved by Director Grenier, seconded by Director Thorpe. Thank you. Any more discussion on this? On the question, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Bless you. Whoever that was. All right. Are there any other items of new business? Director Lepso.
So I've got an item of new business. I want to make old business, and Bill ran away. Meeting's over.
Thank you very much. Any other items of new business? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much, everyone. We are adjourned.